Welcome back to DLC. We appreciate you downloading your DLC episode. As you can tell, we're doing something different today. Isaac is taking a well needed break, and so I volunteered to do an episode. That way, y'all guys won't mess out. So, before we get to the episode, just want to give a shout out to everybody who's been listening, been supporting. We appreciate all the love and support y'all have given us. Um, Make sure to hit that follow, subscribe, give us a rating if you don't mind. And check us out on our social media at Dude Let's Chat on Instagram and Dude Let's Chat Pod on Twitter. And so, with that said, let's get into the topic. As you could tell by the title, we are talking card games, TCG, Yu-Gi-Oh, Pokemon, Magic, all that stuff. And with me, I have a very, very special guest. He's been on a couple of our episodes way back, and so if you've been with us from the very beginning, then you know this man. If you haven't, check out some of our earlier episodes and let us know what you think. But let me introduce the main man, the person who was willing to jump back on and have this conversation with me. Vague Prophet, aka Jeremiah. How you doing, man?
I'm doing good, man. How are you doing?
Not bad, man. Appreciate you coming. Appreciate you doing this episode with me.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. Jacob asked me to come on today. He wanted me to talk about trading card games with him. We both kind of had similar starts to trading card games, it seemed, but we took vastly different approaches and, I guess, different routes, especially with what we ended with, yes. So we're going to be talking about what influenced us today, what influenced me to get to where I was, what influenced him, and what kind of brings us together on it.
Yeah. So we both went different routes, but before we get into that, I kind of want to get some back history. So Jeremiah, what's your history with trading card games? What card games have you played in the past? What did you think about them? How did you feel, as you were growing up? Like, what got you started?
I guess what got me started with trading card games back in the day would have been Pokemon. Like the actual true OG when it first came out, Pokemon. But it's hard to count that. See, when Pokemon first came out, we all kind of jumped on the cards. If you were a Pokemon fan, if you liked anime, if you liked Pokemon, but we didn't know how to play it. To be honest, nobody. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, we just wanted to collect the cards, right? Like, let's be honest. We saw it on TV. We wanted to be like Ash Ketchum, and we wanted to collect the cards.
Yes, and no one knew the actual rules. No one knew what they were doing. So if you did play, it was more like a Pokemon match. You throw out one Pokemon. You do what you can. You did what you could. We didn't really have access to the internet, not readily like everyone does today. And not everyone knew what they were doing with it, so everybody just kind of did their own thing. And like you said, Jacob, we just collected. That's what I did. But the first one that I started playing was Yu-Gi-Oh! Got really big into the show, thought it was really cool. You start playing the game, and,
Right.
it had its issues too, that I'll explore, a bit, a little later. But ultimately, that's the one where we started sitting down and saying, yeah, I'm going to build a deck on this. I want to be like Yugi, I want to be like Kaiba, I want to be like Joey, kinda. You're gonna play what you can. I mean, come on. Who wants to be Joey?
Yeah.
Second fiddle. But that's the game that kind of started me into collecting and playing. From there, kind of took a break from that. I did jump into some other things, like Vanguard when it first came out. It seemed pretty cool. I only played a little bit of it, so I didn't really stay too heavy into it, but it was pretty cool. Um, There was also a failed attempt at a card game on the iToy, if anyone remembers that. I jumped into, but other than that, uh, nothing really until about my college years. Whenever I got into Magic the Gathering, and that was a skyrocket, both from a collector
Yeah,
sense and from playing. You wanted to be the best in whatever group you were playing in, whether it be standard, modern, extended. While I jumped in, they started the EDH. There was just so many different things you could do, so many different little games and big games that were coming out, and so that's what I kind of immersed myself with, and
okay,
that's what I've been
okay.
on. That's what I
So
stick with. Good.
at one point, though, at one point you kind of stopped playing for a
Mhm.
bit.
Yes, yes, it's on and off. It's like a bad relationship, Maybe I should leave, maybe I shouldn't. But I mean, all joking aside, it's a fun game. But
Right, right.
and maybe I don't know if we'll touch on it today. Maybe it's something for a future podcast for them or myself if I'm there. But some things that deter you from playing trading card games sometimes is the communities. Sometimes
Yes.
sometimes you run into some pretty bad characters with it, but I don't think we're here to talk about that today. We're just here kind of talk about
Well,
like the positives, correct?
we're gonna bring that up. So
Yeah.
you know, you got into card games with Pokemon, which I think a lot of people kind of have that similar same history.
Hmm.
And then from Yu-Gi-Oh, you went to Magic and kind of stopped playing for a bit. And like with me, it was all very similar to kind of how your upbringing went. I got into real big into Pokemon, loved it, was addicted to it, never understood how to play it. Parents took me to go play at Hastings once, and that's where I learned how to actually play the game. Did it once, loved it. Of course, growing up, both parents are working, can't always take me. That was like the one and only time I got to actually play it. So it went from just collecting because lack of opportunity, but I still really, really loved it. And like you from Pokemon, I went to Yu-Gi-Oh. I feel like the thing that kind of helped us actually learn how to play Yu-Gi-Oh was the show itself, because the show, even though it taught incorrectly, still taught how the game for the most part worked.
It did, and that's part of the reason to walk away from Yu-Gi-Oh when I was younger. I actually went back. I started playing Yu-Gi-Oh whenever I was young, whenever it was first coming out. Kind of left it and went back in high school actually for a little bit too. Once you kind of knew what was going on, but when you find out you can't attack the moon, and when you find out that the god cards don't have all the powers on the show, and that you'd have to go online to find all the powers, but they're not right, they're not legal. And some of the wording too in Yu-Gi-Oh always threw me
Yeah,
off. For instance, there's a card called Patrician of Darkness, which says that I get to. I mean, the original text was that I choose who my opponent attacks. And I thought that meant for anybody on the battlefield. Most people in my group actually thought that. So it's like, yeah, if you attack me, I'll have you wrap around and attack your own monster. There are effects that do that in Yu-Gi-Oh,
yeah, yeah,
But yeah, but as it turns out, that's not the case. There's a whole ban list you got to be following online, and at the time too, I didn't have internet. I'm just going. I mean, other than going to library, school, and stuff like that, or friends that have it. So it's not going to benefit me to play a game where I have to constantly be watching this.
yeah. So like with Pokemon, we didn't have nothing to kind of teach us. If you're lucky to get the Pokemon trading card game video game that came out with the Game Boy, that helped. But most of us didn't have that when the card game came out.
Yeah.
But with Yu-Gi-Oh, we're introduced to the show with a card game, and everybody's wanting to learn how to play Pokemon, but we don't know how. But this show is actually teaching us how to play Yu-Gi-Oh. And I remember getting my starter decks and getting the rule book and just looking at the rule book like, well, I don't need this because I already know how to play because of the show.
Hmm.
Come to turn out, the show misled a lot of us.
I mean, from the start too. If you watched Yu-Gi-Oh back then, one of the biggest inconsistencies was the life points. They always
Yes.
start at 4,000, but apparently any duel starts at 8,000. Main
Yeah, it went
character.
from 2,000 to 4,000,
Hmm.
and it was just like, I
It's
remember playing it, and
chaotic.
okay, we can't attack directly. And to where it came up to 4,000, they're in Battle City where you could attack directly. And we're like, what is this, a new rule change? It's like, no, that's always been there. We just didn't know.
It's yeah, it's its own painful stuff, but um, you know but that's Yu-Gi-Oh. You know, and that's when you watch the show, it is vastly different. As you grew up, you if you ever looked into the Yu-Gi-Oh franchise, you'll find that the show was supposed to be vastly different, but it
Yes,
turned
yeah.
into a card game that exploded and is still doing well today. So
Yes, yes. And I remember getting into it, and of course, the only person I had to play with was my little brother Isaac, and we would play, and we'll play, of course, the way the show played, and then um, I would collect, build my own decks, and then I met a person in high school who was a few grades above me, but he also played, and he actually played the right way, and he tried to teach me how to play. I'm like, no, that's not right. That's wrong. And he's like, well, read the book. He's like, fine, I'll read the book just to prove you wrong. Read the book, and I was like, I've been lied to. And
bamboozled. That's what happened. You were bamboozled, and it's not fair.
I was bamboozled. And so learned how to play, um, and then would play with my friend in high school. But of course, he was a few grades ahead of me, so he graduated, and then I had nobody.
Hmm.
Still no way to go out and play with other people, and so I kind of just dropped card games. I didn't get into Magic or any of that. When I went to college, I had a lot of friends, real big into Magic. People trying to get me into Magic, but just never got into it.
That's
And
fair.
so, yeah, I mean, to me, it was kind of like, you know, at that point, it was like, this is too nerdy for me. Like, when I thought of nerdy card games, like, Magic was at its top. Like, there was like a tier, right?
It doesn't
I
get
felt like,
worse than that. That's it. You know, that's the pinnacle.
yeah, it's like, you got Pokemon for beginners, then you got Yu-Gi-Oh for people who want to get more serious, and then the hardcore players play Magic. That's how I seen it. And honestly, that's kind of still how I still see it today. Is like Magic is like hardcore players.
I mean, but yeah, but Magic its presence in the TCG. I mean, it runs it at this point. Now we've seen, and you
Yeah,
and I on our own have looked up the stats and stuff for like who has the biggest tournament, who has the longest running tournament. But it doesn't change the fact that in the TCG community right now, Magic is what runs that world. It has so many different formats to play. It has so many cards that you can utilize, so many combos.
yes,
Even in terms where it'd be meta in things like vintage and legacy. I mean, there are of course meta decks, top 10s, top 20s that are really expensive, I might add, but they get the job done, and they're not necessarily better or worse than anything else. There's not one defining deck of you've got to run this or you just will never win.
right,
Constantly. I mean, there are aspects, of course, and we'll go into that. So for Magic, so I've talked about, of course, Yu-Gi-Oh and Pokemon, and those are just groups of friends.
yeah,
But I will say, with Magic, what
yeah,
got me into Magic was a friend of mine who went into the military. He went to the National Guard. When he came back from basic and he got done with everything, he was really big into this game. Apparently, they played it a lot. So he showed us how to play. I jumped on as well. I found my colors. I loved black. I loved red. I really played around those colors, and I just kind of kept with that. Now, when we started out, of course, we weren't doing standard. We were doing custom, if anything else. We were learning. We learned a lot about the different types of tournaments there were, different types of play styles and games that you could play within the Magic community. But we were just using whatever cards we get our hands on, you know. But then we started jumping into
right,
the standard scene. Standard was great. Standard was really fun, actually. I jumped in at the tail end of the first Zendikar arc, which was Zendikar, World Wake, and Rise of Eldrazi. But at that time, we also went into Scars of Mirrodin. And it was going into that I found out about the stories, which is what completely just grabbed me about the game. It has an actual storyline. Now you gotta look it up. You gotta go find it. but it
Yeah,
has a storyline.
I remember you and one of your uh, friends um, trying to tell me the story, and honestly, it seemed like the lore behind it was so interesting, and it was very poetic. I'll even say of how these stories kind of went about. But man,
Very
is there
well done. Yes,
a lot of
yes.
information. Again,
And to be honest, not all of it ties into itself. I mean, I guess in the last couple of years it has with War of the Spark, but and if you know that, hey, kudos, that was a pretty good way to pull people in. But I would say that you just got to find your interests. You know, if you're really big into the feudal Japan era, you might want to go and look into the Kamigawa arc and like fall into that. But they've got other things. If you really
right?
like the kind of like the Greek gods and stuff like that, or just just kind of that setting and aesthetic in general, Theros might be it. Uh, there was actually one kind of an homage to Bloodborne that came out and the older horror movies, like zombies, werewolves, and vampires and stuff, with Innistrad, which was one of my favorites
Right.
after Scars. If you like the whole feeling of like a Dungeons and Dragons setting, in terms of like a big city and guilds and factions and stuff, all the Ravnica sets are up your alley. And I think actually the D&D thing is what really captures a lot of people with the game.
So so there's a lot of like stories and
Hmm. Yes.
like different types of creatures and whatnot.
Oh yeah.
But at one point, you did kind of stop playing
Oh yeah. And
card games
so
in general.
yes, that so so kind of jumping off what you said, Jacob. You played until you didn't have a group, and that's about the
Yeah,
same with myself. Though I guess slightly different. So I had the group. Heck, that group still plays pretty strongly, and most of them are still good friends of mine. But they're toxic, and it's
yeah.
frustrating. And I'll call it out because I called it out then. I'll call it out now. And I think, hey, no, this is a campaign now, guys. Whoever's listening, if you like to play card games, call out your toxic friends. It's the only way
Yes,
to do
yes.
it nowadays.
Don't don't go into an unhealthy relationship in
Hmm.
general. But so you stopped playing, I stopped playing, and I do want to give a shout out to Isaac, and he's brought it up in past episodes. But Isaac, I remember calling me one day and it's like, "Hey, old school Yu-Gi-Oh cards are kind of getting printed. Me and Angel are about to buy some. Do you want some?" And I was like, you know what? Sure, why not? I'm not, I would indulge a little bit. Since y'all are going to start playing, I'll get back into it. And so I got into it, and I got into it hard. And I brought it to Jeremiah.
Oh yeah.
And I was like, Jeremiah, you know, for those who don't know, we work together, and sometimes we have breaks. I was like, during our breaks, let's play Yu-Gi-Oh. And Jeremiah had a huge collection compared to mine.
Oh yeah. Oh
And
yeah.
so he was ready for this.
Oh yeah. I never give stuff away unless it's trading. Well, that's not true. You know that, Jacob. I'll give things away. I don't
Yeah,
care. But I
you're a nice
have a
guy.
very big collection of cards. But I'm kind of like nowadays, kind of like the collector hunter. It's like, that card seems like it would see some play later on in life. Let's put that back and watch it jump in price.
Right.
And I've talked to Jacob about this on many occasions. Like, if you ever want to get into the Magic scene, like, you just look at something that's in standard right now or just came out. Kind of look at how strong it is now, how much it's going for. Kind of got to bite the bullet. Jacob's more of a penny
Yeah,
buyer. I mean, if
I
it's
am.
yeah, if it's a low cost card under $1, he'll go for it. Me, it's like maybe it's the Magic days, and that is some of the differences. Like, yeah, $10 really ain't much for a card if it's gonna like win you the game. And in my case, go ahead.
Jeremiah's the investor.
I am an
Jeremiah's the
investor.
investor.
I'll
I'm
always call
just
out
like,
Immortal
I
Sun,
want
baby.
cheap cards.
Like one of my best achievements was the Immortal Sun that came out back in oh gosh, can't even think of the set now because it's been a while. I didn't actually play in this Ixalan. Didn't play in the set actually, but I did grab some cards from it. And one of them was a card that just had all these little pieces. But if you were to go and ask people in the community about Immortal Sun, it was a mythic card that came out in the second set. There's two blocks to every set. The second block, and it was going when it first dropped for like $6, and everybody was like, "Oh, just it's just a little bit of everything you need on the battlefield for 6 mana, and 6 mana
Yeah.
is kind of dicey, and it is kind of pricey, It is what it is, and I was like, no, that does just enough in every single respect to be good enough for other game types in the future, and so I bought in, and I'm gonna go look up the price right now, but the last time I looked at it, it's going for like $30,
Yeah,
So,
it's sitting pretty.
but all of my
But
friends, they were just like, no, there's no way. It's like, hey, and my thing is like, it's not just friends. Like when you go talk to people, I was like, that's just too much for a card. It's like, is it though? Is it?
so going back to Yu-Gi-Oh, because like I said, Isaac got me into it,
Mhm.
and like when I got into it hard. Like it hit the nostalgia bone, and with Isaac, he got into it, but then he got tired of it. And when I was playing, of course, we didn't have synchro or
Oh,
pendulum
that stuff was
or
so confusing getting
all that
back into
stuff.
this.
Yeah, we all we had were fusion monsters, and so getting back into it, it got way more complicated than what I remembered as a kid. And like as a kid, I still thought it was kind of complicated, but now it's just like a whole nother level. And
Especially
so I
rituals.
remember,
Ritual monsters were very,
yes,
very like it's like so it's in your hand. It's not over there, and you gotta do everything correctly, and you gotta hope to have it. And then the confusion of can you just pop a ritual card and go get the ritual monster? Does it have to be in your hand? What do we do?
yeah, it was just so much work for it.
Hmm.
Where nowadays you had like these monsters that just like automatically synchro summoned or XYZ summoned. And so there was a lot of factors into this card game. But, we tried to relearn it and we started playing it. And honestly, I would say it was a lot of fun. Like at the very beginning, it was a lot of fun. And I really enjoyed it. And I got like, both, I would say both me and Jeremiah can correct me if I'm wrong, but I want to say we both kind of got into it really hard because we would start buying like a bunch of cards to build all these different types of decks.
Oh yeah, but we weren't
And
we
of
weren't going
course,
crazy on the prices. I mean, if it was deals,
yeah, we're
uh,
doing budget decks. We're doing
yeah.
budget decks. Um, but we had like 6, 8 different budget decks ready to play, and of course Isaac jumped out of it, and so my outlet was just Jeremiah. Like we're going to be played, and oh, you're working. Well, hurry up, finish what you're doing, and let's go play. And it was really fun. Um,
For the most part,
but
it was
yeah, for the
good
most,
when it was just us. And even when we pulled, like I pulled my wife into it, he tried to pull his wife into it, and I mean that was pretty great. It's whenever you
yeah,
start trying to play at other places where there's actual players, and that's when you get into again that toxic community, and that's the thing that will ultimately
exactly,
be the killer of any thing you can do out there, whether it be video games, whether it be card games, or even sports. Toxic players and toxic fans. In this case, we had budget decks. Jacob and I were not. We'll just go off this one, the most recent. Jacob and I were not silent about that. We'd be like, yeah, we try to build a deck under $10. We try to build a deck under $5. We try to do whatever we could cheap and what we had on hand. And people sit down at the table like, oh, I'll play with this deck. It's not that good, but it's like turn two wins.
yeah,
They're clubbing baby seals, and we're like, guys, we literally just want to play. There's no fun in getting absolutely raffle stomped. When
yeah,
we told y'all this is strictly casual. This was just supposed to be for extended play, and then when you would beat those people, I mean that's just unheard of. That's the worst
yeah.
worst time that you could possibly give them in their life. It's like you just slapped their mother. I mean,
And, like,
go ahead.
and
Sorry.
we're not saying that the Yu-Gi-Oh community is all bad. It's not. Like you go to any community, there's going to be toxic players. So we're not trying to just like downpour on Yu-Gi-Oh. But for us, we're coming in at this at a casual level, and the rules were already confusing for us. The wording, because of course, me and Jeremiah would have our little small fights about how cards are activated. But at the end of the day,
There's a
be like,
respect.
there's a
There's a
respect, and it's like,
respect.
we'll
Yeah.
just do it this way. And of course, you had other people who were more like even though it wasn't a tournament setting, they were still like at your throat about it.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, there's sharking where people just try to give you advice, but then have a way to counter the advice they just gave you. So there was some toxicness in the community. I remember going to a card shop trying to engage with people, and they wouldn't really like since they didn't know me, they didn't want to engage.
Mm.
And like I said, not just taking shots at Yu-Gi-Oh. This is everywhere. This is every community. They have people like these.
Oh yeah,
But you have to find the
yeah. Go ahead. Sorry.
oh, no, you're good. You have to find the good ones because there was a couple that were nice and like, yeah, we'll play. And of course, I'll get beat, and they'll tell me kind of what's going on, and the not in a arrogant, I'm better than you, but kind of like, I see you're new. Here's some tips, and those are the good ones.
Yep.
But I
Few and
know
far between, man.
for me, I kind of stepped out of Yu-Gi-Oh just because for me, one, if I wanted to actually stand a chance, I had to buy expensive cards, and that was kind of one of my frustrations with Yu-Gi-Oh is that these cards were, I felt like, overpriced. Like no reason for them to be this high.
Yeah, that I will. It's definitely a change from the Pokemon scene. Pokemon, there are some expensive cards, but
Yes.
admittedly, like looking at the Pokemon scene, and of course comparing it to Magic, but then even Yu-Gi-Oh is fine too. It's like that's pretty cheap comparatively. Like if I were to actually compare y'all's highest card to our highest card, it's not fair. But even in the middle, a decent deck
Yeah.
for Magic, for instance, is going to be at least $500-600. There are budget decks out there, so I'm not speaking over those. Those budget decks are few and far between, and generally they're not going to win as consistently as the cards that have actually made their mark and are like 50, 60, $70 and up, and you have to have four of
Yeah.
them.
Yeah. I mean, like
So,
with Magic, like with Yu-Gi-Oh, these cards are super expensive right now, and
mm-hmm.
then they get reprinted and they're not as expensive. So it's like there's no point, at least in my eyes, paying $60 for a card that's just going to go down in value. Whereas with Magic, they kind of hold their value.
Yes.
Um, but playing Yu-Gi-Oh, both of us kind of stepped away from it.
Oh yeah.
And it's kind of sad that it was kind of due with some of the toxicness. But I wouldn't say that was the main reason. I know for me, it just got too like the toxicness was part of it, but it was also kind of like the price. I didn't want to have to buy these expensive cards to actually stay relevant. And I kind of just was like, I already put so much money. Of course, in my eyes, it's a lot of money. I know some people, it's like that's hardly anything, but
I would say like
for
that's the
me,
duality that we've got right now because we agree on the toxicness. The other reason to walk away from it is the play group in general. Because other than Jacob and my wife, I really didn't like anybody else in there. Jacob's wife stepped away well before. That's because some of the toxicity was
yeah,
brought to her. And to be honest, I'll even admit like that was on me because I've been playing with these groups of people and these people that are just super toxic. And then I come and Jacob's trying to help her, and I start getting onto them like they get onto me, and
yeah,
so I had to change that.
yeah,
That's why
it
you
rubs
call
off.
it out, baby. Like you got to call out that toxicness, baby. Otherwise, you can't make a good place.
You do, and the thing is, like, if you're around it so much, it starts to rub off, and it affects your friends, it affects your family, and
Mm.
there's no need for that.
No.
This is a card game. You're not playing in a tournament. There's no need to get like super anal about it. Um, and that just kind of deterred us away from it. And
Yeah,
so
and that's the
when
main
we
factor.
left, oh, go ahead.
No, I would say because when you would compare a price, if you remember, I'd be like, "Are you sure that's a lot of money here? Because you're telling me for 150, $200, I could have a really good deck that runs as well as everybody else up here." And that's
Yeah,
cheap compared to the Magic scene, which of course that's where our duality is there. Uh,
yeah. And so stepping from that, so when we left Yu-Gi-Oh, me and Jeremiah kind of parted ways in the sorts. He went towards Magic. I went back to Pokemon, and we both kind of dropped Yu-Gi-Oh.
hmm.
And so, with that being said, Jeremiah, kind of give us, you know, give us a reason why you kind of went back to Magic.
So going back to Magic, it was kind of a man getting back into card games so late now in life. It was really fun, but I don't want to necessarily stop playing card games. I love playing the strategy behind it, the fun little hijinks, and just the little combos you can do, and the friends, the people that you can put yourself around when you got the good ones, you know. And so I told myself I'd walk back. And I looked at all the cards I had. I had few Pokemon cards. I had a bunch of Yu-Gi-Oh cards, a couple of other cards here and there from different things. But then I also had this massive collection of Magic cards. It's like, I mean, I've got enough here to make something viable. And so I was like, well, let's just get into it again. I found a lot of love in the type EDH. Um, it's pretty great. The format is 100 card singleton. You can only have multiples of basic land cards. Other than that, you got one commander. It has to be a legendary creature or something of legendary nature that says in its card description it can be a commander. And 99 other cards. You can only play within the colors of the commander that you chose, and you just go from there. It was a really good game type. It let me utilize a lot of these cards that I was collecting that may have dropped in value, or even if they had the value, but it's like, hey, it'd be nice to play with these.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. And
and
your wife also got really big into Magic when
oh,
she kind of learned the
oh,
ropes.
she did. She fell in love with how cute. So, Magic. One of the things I would stand by with Magic over other card games, it's just how beautiful the artwork can be. They have multiple artists like all the time. I'm sure every card game does, but in Magic the Gathering, the settings, the cards, they look so good. And she fell in love with cats and the cute things, and heck, in the last 2 years they dropped a recent reprint of a lot of the cats that you would use in this game, and they just look cute as all get out, and she loves it. She loves using the cat deck. She made a couple of other decks, in fact, but the cat deck is really where it's at. Me, I'm a vampire guy. Hate me if you love it, but we jump back in to play with ourselves, and to be honest, that's kind of the other reason why. I really like the aesthetic of playing with Jacob and just Jacob, and anybody that we pulled in that we actually thought were cool. My older group was still doing their thing, and we would play that every once in a while until it got a little toxic. It got a little endearing. I think the reason I got back into Magic the most, though, is because I just like the playstyle. I just feel like there's a lot more freedom with a lot of cards. There's so many more options and routes to take. There's a lot
Right.
more shenanigans that happen in Magic, and you know, I just felt like that would be the best route to go. Plus the aesthetic. I mean, I go back to the art. It just appeals to me. I'm a guy who likes kind of all of that, like how it looks, how it plays, how it feels. You're the summoner. You're the mage. You're the planeswalker, if you will. And you're
Yeah.
yeah. So, but that's me. And you, of course, you went back to Pokemon. Uh,
Yeah, yeah. But I know one of your other reasons because, like I said, one of our complaints with Yu-Gi-Oh! 2 was the wording,
oh gosh.
and
Yeah.
it was so complex, but also it felt so restrictive. And I remember you always bringing up with Magic, like with Magic, it's complex too, but it's more fluid. It's not as like the wording isn't as confusing as it is with Yu-Gi-Oh!
No,
And I
it's
remember,
well more explained in Magic, and
yeah,
there's erratas to it. They'll go as far as reprinting certain cards. They have a huge database you can go on, just kind of have access to that. Um, Magic cards will, I mean, most of the time, unless it's very specific to a particular set, there's going to be multiple reprintings of different cards. So even if it says something weird, like if you read old Magic card from back day, it'll say like, when this card is played, it will enter the battlefield and you will bury this card. And when you bury this card, you will then tap 3 of your lands. These lands must be planes. Yeah, it's like and like it says all this stuff. And as we've gotten, you know, better at talking and typing, we put in better things like, hey, when this enters out the battlefield, sacrifice it. If you do that and pay 3 white, this effect happens. So we learned it didn't have to be so convoluted, you know.
Yeah,
Versus
where
Yu-Gi-Oh, who
with
never
Yu-Gi-Oh,
changes
it
that.
was
God.
yeah, yeah.
I mean,
Yu-Gi-Oh was
Wabako did, but like that's. I mean, Wabako did. It did because like the original thing was you don't take any damage from anything. So everyone thought that you could just Wabako and then be like, "Hey, I'm cool. Like you can hit me with a oh, I don't know, some type of thing that does damage. That's not a creature, some spell. I can't even think of one now. But you hit me with a spell and it does no damage. And then they had to come out and say any battle damage, and I thank them for that
yes.
because it needed to happen. But golly,
Yeah, I mean, I remember some of our frustrations was just the wording, and like
mm,
with Yu-Gi-Oh and Magic, there's chains, and there's a way the cards are played one after another, and how you're supposed to chain them. And it was frustrating because some of the simplest words could reverse an entire Yu-Gi-Oh chain.
yep,
I remember one being like, when this card is destroyed compared to if this card is destroyed. And the when and the if had so significant importance on how that chain was going to go. And
it was
it
just
was
too
just
much.
so frustrating that not only did I have to learn how to play certain combos, learn certain chains, but I also had to make sure the wording fit these. And if the wording was mistyped or misput, then it just threw this whole fight of, well, how does this work then? Um, why, I remember playing a game where one of my monsters got destroyed, and then someone did a trap card, and because my card said if this or when this card gets destroyed, summon a monster from your deck, but because my opponent played a magic card, it no longer has that effect. And I thought that was so stupid.
Yeah, I mean
And
that stuff happens.
it had to say if in order to still get the effect. And that was kind of what also kind of, I would say for the both of us, kind of deterred us away from the game. Because with you is like, Magic is complicated, but at least Magic is more specific, and
Hmm.
you know the explanations are better. And with me is like, this is just too much detail. I'm out.
I think the biggest thing is that once the questions happen, they get answered. That's my biggest thing. Like you said, the when and if, it was a point of
Yeah.
timing, if I remember correctly, because I think when it said
Yes.
when, it was when it was transitioning from the battlefield to the graveyard, and if it was if, it checked the presence or something in the graveyard, and it's
Yeah.
explained, but it's explained on boards, it's explained in comment sections where everybody can argue and refute it, versus on when you go to Wizards, or if you go to pretty much any site that's connected to the Magic the Gathering database, with each of the cards, it'll tell you the errata. These erratas are put in from Wizards themselves. There's no negotiating it. It's hey,
Yeah.
this is it. It's all in one place, or it's on the site that you go look it up, like look up the card with. So that is
So
what I really like, is the fact that once they put it
yeah.
down, that's it. It's down, and it is what it is.
And as Jeremiah was saying, like, we would have to go and check the internet
and
on how
and
these rules,
sift
like,
through freaking comments like of people saying no, it
yes,
doesn't work that way. It's like, but it does work that way. Like it literally
like
says it right here.
it was starting to frustrate us both because it got to the point where we would be spending more time on our phone making
Mm-hmm.
sure these cards played out the way we thought than actually playing the game. And so Jeremiah went to Magic, I went to Pokemon. And the reason I went to Pokemon was I remember walking through a Walmart store, and this is while we were still kind of playing Yu-Gi-Oh, but we were both kind of already, like, one foot was already out the door. We were just looking for it. We're like, as Jeremiah said, we love card games, and we necessarily don't want to stop playing card games, but we both were getting tired of Yu-Gi-Oh. And with Jeremiah, he found Magic to be his outlet, and that's kind of what he got. With me, I didn't have nothing yet, and I remember walking through Walmart on my way back home, and there was an open pack. Apparently, someone tried to steal cards, and I picked it up. I saw an employee walk by. I was like, "Hey, I found this," and he grabbed it, and I was like, "Okay, appreciate that." And I just asked, like, what are you going to do with this? Like, we'll probably just have to toss it. It's like, well, if you're going to toss it, can I just keep it? I remember him looking around, pulls the sleeve or put the cards out of the wrapper, hands them to me, and just like walks off. I'm like, okay, I guess that's a yes. And I remember looking through the cards. I'm like, man, these are so different from what I remembered as a kid. And they also had a card at the back that had a code, so you can actually play the online game. And so I'm going to give this a shot. Downloaded the game, and for those who are interested, it's Pokemon Trading Card Game Online. You can get it as an app on like your computer or like on your tablet, or I want to say it's for Mac and or for Windows and Apple. I think that's the only one you can get it. Um, but I remember getting it and thinking to myself, I want to try this out. I want to see if, you know, it can be a new card game for me. And so I get it and download the game. And one of my favorite things I loved about it is the just how simple it was to play. And I remember just thinking to myself, I am getting kind of, tired of all these rules, all this complex. And Pokemon was just so simple. It was extremely simple. Um, but it looks like I lost Jeremiah. So we're going to take a small break and I'll get right back into explaining what got me into Pokemon. So hang tight, guys. All right, guys. So we're back. Sorry, we had little internet issues. Jeremiah kind of got disconnected, but he's back.
Hey,
Great.
buddy.
There he is. Okay. So before we had to take a short break, I was given kind of the reasons why I kind of went into Pokemon. As we were saying, Jeremiah went into the Magic route, and for me, I went more into Pokemon. And I feel the reasoning for it was pretty much because a lot of the issues we are having with Yu-Gi-Oh was the rulings, was always having to look on the phone and make sure what the card says is what we thought, how it's supposed to be played. And with Pokemon, it was pretty straightforward. One of the things I liked about it is that when it's your turn, your opponent can't do nothing. And so, like in Yu Gi Oh! Magic, every time you play a card, you kind of have to pause and wait for a response.
Hmm.
And for like Yu-Gi-Oh, it's either by monster effect, trap cards, magic cards. I think with magic, it's what instant spells or something like that.
I mean, it just depends on the situation. Any abilities on monsters that don't specify a speed, such as sorcery speed, are only on your turn. And instants can, in certain instances, cards can be played on your opponent's turn based off of effects such as flash, or it'll specifically state in the card. For instance, this can be played at any time, or something like that. And of course,
Right.
emblems. But the vast majority is instance, monster effects, and uh, possibly even triggered abilities from
Right.
your side can happen on your opponent's turn. But yeah.
So with that, I mean, that's like with Pokemon. There's none of that. There's no like chaining or timing. It's your turn, and then you play your cards and just hope your opponent doesn't have a counter on their turn, because just like they can't do nothing to you while it's your turn, you can't do nothing to them while it's their turn. And to me, the simplicity of that I really enjoyed. The cards too, the wordings were not to the T. So like in Yu-Gi-Oh, and I'm not sure if they're this strict in Magic, so you can kind of correct me. Uh, but I'm assuming it is. If a card says, get three creatures from the graveyard and put them in your hand. If you didn't have three creatures, you couldn't play the card.
Ah,
And I'm assuming with Magic, it might be similar.
sort of. A lot of times, especially nowadays, Magic has the it'll say, for instance, up to three, so it can be zero, or
Right.
it'll be like search your deck for up to three cards, put them in your
But
hand or whatever.
for like cards that didn't say up to,
So
like
there
say,
are some that are pretty strict. One example would be like choose one instant and one sorcery in the graveyard, and you can play both those. I can't remember the name of the spell at this point, but if I remember correctly, you can't play that unless there is an instant and a sorcery in your graveyard or in a
right.
graveyard. And I could be wrong with that, but yes, there are some things that are pretty strict. I guess another
And
another point I'd go with that is uh, kind of tricky wording in terms of the effect or status of a card. For instance, if something says if this creature dies, that actually has a pretty set turn. To us, we see it as, hey, it got removed from the battlefield, it was supposed to go to the graveyard, so it's dead. However, if it never touches the graveyard, it never died, and you got to figure that out. There is a little bit of complication
yeah,
in wording too, and it seems as though, from what you're saying, that Pokemon doesn't have that.
yeah, and that's one thing I really enjoyed about Pokemon is Pokemon doesn't have that. So where it's very strict with Yu-Gi-Oh! Magic and like you card says pick up three, and if you don't have three, well then you can't play because you don't have enough targets. And Pokemon, for example, a card called Energy Retrieval says pick up two energies from your discard. Um, Even if you had one, you were still allowed to play it because in Pokemon it's finish as much of the effect of the card as you're able to.
Mm,
And so as long as you have a target, then say it's just one, you can still play it. Now if you have two, you have to get both. But if you only have one, you can still play it, where in other card games they're real strict on you can't. And the simplicity of that I really enjoyed.
So let me ask you
Um,
this, to kind of cut in. What if you had no energies? Could you still play that card, or does there have to be
no,
a valid target? Okay.
there has to be a valid target, and then once you find a valid target, then you try to complete the card as much as possible.
Okay.
Another example is a supporter card called Guzma, which states switch your opponent's Pokemon with the Pokemon from their bench, and then you switch. And if you don't have no targets to pick from, say your opponent only has one Pokemon and there's none in the bench, then you can't play that card.
Mm,
But if your opponent has at least one Pokemon on the bench, then you can play it, switch it, and then when it comes to you switching, even if you don't have a target, you can still play the card because once the target started, you just finish up to as much as possible.
okay.
And if I don't have a Pokemon to switch with, then my active stays my active. I can still play the card.
All right. Well, that makes sense.
So, like to me, the simpleness is what I like, and I know compared to Magic and Yu-Gi-Oh, Pokemon is very simple. But to me, I also find that there's it's in it that in itself its own challenges,
Mm,
um, because you're wanting to make moves to prepare for your opponent's move, and I don't know. To me, the simpleness of it also has its own like it's not boring. It's still complicated on strategy wise, but not so much on card text, and that's what kind of made me fall in love with the game. Also, it's very cheap. Like Jeremiah was saying, Magic can get kind of expensive,
oh yeah.
and Yu-Gi-Oh is expensive. And the one thing I will say about Magic is that Magic cards tend to hold their value more than Yu-Gi-Oh cards. Um, and if you're playing Pokemon, you can get expensive cards, but you don't need expensive cards. So in Pokemon, there's cards that you can get full arts of. You can get the fancy looking version of cards and pay extra money for. or you can just get the real basic form of it, which does the exact same thing for like a quarter.
Mm.
And so building a deck and still being very competitive is, a norm. Like you build a like a $30 deck in Yu-Gi-Oh and you're gonna get your butt kicked. You build a $25 deck in Pokemon and you're like you have like one of the top decks. And that's another thing that kind of brought me to Pokemon.
Mm.
Also the fact that, as a kid I never actually really got a chance to play it. And so being able to play it, also kind of sparks some nostalgic feelings.
No, and I do agree with you. Like looking at some of the cards and the effects, because I've been there and been privileged enough to see you pull some really good cards. And I mean I know you like them and they look really good. I mean from the Magic side, we kind of share the same. I guess pursuit because you want it's not just about how effective a card is. Sometimes it's just aesthetic.
Yeah.
Um,
And
yeah, go ahead.
with Pokemon, it's more, I would say it's more of a collector game
Mm-hmm.
than it's a competitive game. Um, I remember watching a YouTuber, and there's a lot of YouTubers out there that just open packs. They don't play; they just open packs. And I remember one of the YouTubers, saying, "No, there's a lot more people that play Pokemon than collect." And I kind of had to disagree with them because I would say out of 10 people who buy a pack from Walmart, out of the 10, there's probably only like two or three players
Mm.
because it's more of a collector or it's more of a collection. And everybody's really just wanting the few cards that are worth big bucks because honestly, most of these cards aren't worth a whole lot unless you get like certain specific ones, like the chase cards. But if you're going in there as just, want to play the game, I really enjoy it because it's not as complicated and not as expensive. And so those are kind of my reasons why I went to Magic and then, or not Magic, to Pokemon. And I do enjoy playing Magic. Jeremiah actually taught me how to play Magic, and it is very fun.
Mm-hmm.
It's just super expensive.
I mean, so and it doesn't have to be. There are game types for Magic for budget, such as like Popper, for instance, where it's like low, like it's common cards. It shouldn't be that expensive, but I
Yeah.
think that's also what shoots Magic in the foot, if you will. I mean, there are budget ways to run Magic and to have fun with it. Heck, you can pretty much do your own kind of game type with it. I do drafts all the time with a couple of my friends. Just we'll buy a box together, try to find a really cheap one online, and then draft some cards and have some fun with it. Um, but the problem is whenever you have so many different game types, that's where you get the fluctuation in prices. Pauper started
Yeah.
getting actual acclaim, for instance, with Magic the Gathering in the last couple of years, where they're trying to make that into an actual legit like part of Magic the Gathering. I don't know how far
And
that's gone because I just heard about it and I was seeing it. But as soon as they had mentioned it, things like Ashnod's Altar and things like that started rising in price, where previously you could have gotten it for like 50 cents.
yeah, and I remember we're looking into that,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of and that was one of your concerns was like with Magic, and it's not a bad thing, but there's just so many people that play Magic that when a new format comes, there's going to be a huge gathering to it. And with the huge gathering, people are going to want to make the best deck of that format.
Hey, and I'm
And
not against that either in certain situations. I always love it when my little special lands, my Zendikar expeditions and stuff like that
yeah,
I have when a new game type comes out and these can be incorporated. Obviously, you're going to see a spike, and that's my collector side. But when
yeah,
it came to things
and
like
that's that
Popper,
that
I wish it would have been a little
yeah,
more, yeah,
that
affordable.
goes to the point of Magic. Even like with this Pauper format that's supposed to be cheap, is starting to get more and more expensive. That's one thing I will say about Magic. The cards, even though are expensive, hold their value a lot more than
Hmm. They do.
Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh.
I
Um,
mean, and some things don't have any. Again, it comes down to the art too. Part of the reason I got
Yeah.
into it is the same that most people get into Magic the Gathering is just because they just love how it looks and the feel of it. But I mean, there are cards out there that go for way too much for no reason at all. You know.
Yeah. I
Um,
mean, and that's the same for Pokemon, but more sense in the collector
hmm
world. Like you got like Charizards that's been reprinted hundreds of times. That's still going for like hundreds of dollars. But as a competitive player, I really enjoy the cheap factor of it.
Yes.
It is sad that there's not as big of a community that plays than Magic. I want to say our community might be smaller than Yu-Gi-Oh because usually when I go to shops, I see more Yu-Gi-Oh players than I do Pokemon players. Um, so if y'all haven't played Pokemon, I would suggest giving that a try. Like I said, it's really cheap. It's really easy to learn and play. But if not, that's okay too. If you're a Yu-Gi-Oh player, like I said, we're not trying to take shots at Yu-Gi-Oh. We just kind of, started off at Yu-Gi-Oh, hit some bad spots, and kind of just split ways.
Yes, and you know, and I talked earlier about like the toxic community of it. And the thing is, there's a toxic community in every game type, in every card game.
Yes,
Like Pokemon has
yes,
it, Magic has it, Vanguard has it. I'm sure there's people who still play that card game on the iToy, and you know that probably has it too. I mean, you're gonna have that. You know, there's no way around toxicity in a competitive game, in any game that has competitive setting. That's why I really advocate for calling it out. Like, hey, you don't got to be that way.
yes.
Let's be chill with it. How are you going to get more people into it? How are you going to make friends by being obstinate towards someone? I just hate it. You know.
That and don't get pressured into being those kind of people.
hmm
Just because this person is being toxic and he's your friend doesn't mean you have to be toxic with them.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but I mean that kind of wraps up this episode, guys. I don't know if Jeremiah has any final thoughts.
I'm tired.
He's tired. All right. So that'll be it for this episode, guys. Let us know what y'all think. Let us know what games y'all have played.
hmm
If y'all played any TCG games before, whether it's Yu-Gi-Oh, Magic, Pokemon, Digimon just came out with a new game. There's Dragon Ball, Vanguard, Card Fight. There's all these. Let us know which ones y'all played, and if y'all haven't played any, I highly recommend Pokemon. It's very simple. They have a free online game you can play to learn, or not play, not pay, to learn how to play it. It's free. Just give it a try.
And on
But
my side of it, I would say go for like Magic the Gathering Arena. You know, it's about the same.
yeah,
It's a free game that you can play. I mean, just like with Pokemon, you can either try to do your best, win to get your packs, or you can pay money to get packs. You know, there's always going to be that factor to it, but it is a way of playing online with a more balanced rule set. Um, because, like Jacob had brought up earlier, kind of going back to the point he was saying that it's simpler with Pokemon, and it's true. There are still going to be some aspects to Magic that are a little confusing. So I will say that playing things like MTG Arena and some of the old like Magic the Gathering games they used to release every year, those really help me understand some mechanics a little better than just trying to read through pages and pages of rules. So
yeah,
I would
it's a good
advocate it.
way to get started.
Yes.
So, but that's it, guys. We appreciate you downloading your episode DLC where we talk games, movies, and all things in between.
Yep.
This is Jacob standing in for Isaac and my guest Jeremiah.
Thanks for having me and thanks for listening. Love y'all.
Y'all guys have a good night. Bye.
DLC.